would be called a kuntres, a kind of booklet or pamphlet, which in the English translation is about 40 pages long, in which Maimonides explains the basic principles of healthcare when you are healthy. He explains how a person who is sick should relate to what is happening to him, when he should go to a doctor, when he should not. He speaks about the art of medicine. He gives detailed advice to the doctor how to approach the healing of the patient. He has a philosophical section when he explains that physical well-being is not enough. There has to be emotional and spiritual well-being. There has to be equanimity. There has to be the philosophical approach to life. All of this he explains in the space of about 40 pages, in which he gives very detailed advice about what is good to eat and what is not good to eat. He speaks about hygiene, he speaks about sexual behavior, he speaks about all of those subjects that he had already written about in the Mishnah Torah in Hilchos Deos chapter 4 in greater detail. The book has been translated into English by the outstanding expert in Torah medical ethics of our time, Dr. Fred Rossner, a doctor here in New York, a distinguished scholar who has published many, many important publications in the field of bioethics and so on and so forth. And among his works are a translation of Maimonides' more accessible medical writings, together with extensive, very scholarly notes. And this series was published by an institute in Haifa, Israel, called the Rambom Institute, which consists of several volumes. And in one of those volumes is contained the translation of this kuntres, this booklet about the basics of healthcare and healing. It's well worth those who have access to the internet to do a Google search for this book. I don't have my copy here with me. I treasure it very greatly. I won't let it out of my hand. It's a fairly rare book, but I'm sure that through Amazon, anybody who's interested could get hold of this. Now, you have to understand, if you're reading such a work, that you're reading a work that comes literally out of the Middle Ages, that reflects the philosophical view, that is the view of our Torah Hashkafa, and also the level of knowledge and relationship with the world and with the creation that stems from ancient philosophy and from the Torah philosophical viewpoint. You have to understand that you're dealing in a world without pharmacies and drugstores and supermarkets. You're dealing in a world where the foods were very simple foods, and it was not necessary for Rambam to state that you should keep off additives and, as far as you can, keep away from all the things that I was talking about earlier. You have to understand how to approach this book, and I dare say that it will be best communicated to the public in the form of classes going through and explaining how this advice relates to us. And I hope that this will be done, and I myself have devoted quite a few years to trying to do this, for the reasons I spoke to you about at the beginning, because the issue of how we all take care of ourselves is so important to the world and to our future, the future of the Jewish people. I'd like to read to you a sample of some of the things that Rambam speaks about in the Hanagat HaBriut, the healthcare regimen, and these are available in my book, The Wings of the Sun, which is a study of Refu'ah, the concept of healing in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the Talmud, in the Kabbalah, and in Chassidut of Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. And I devoted a whole chapter to Rambam and his medical and healthcare teachings, because he is such a significant figure in the Torah spectrum. Now, he's quite clear and upfront that there are two main factors involved in the maintenance of health and well-being, and those are nutrition and physical activity and exercise. He's absolutely clear about that, and he writes about this. I'm not going to go into the things he says in detail about what to eat, I just want to give you a general picture, but he's quite clear that he definitely says that whole meal bread is the best. He says the very best food of all is a food that is made out of the whole wheat kernels that are ground and made into a sourdough bread. He recommends eating chicken and light meats, the meat of small animals, not the meat of weighty, hefty, old animals. He is against the consumption of dairy products unless they are completely fresh. He speaks about a number of foods, including carobs and including certain other fruits and large fish that he says are damaging to the system. So he has a lot of things which I'd like to speak about in a little while, in a little more detail about as to how we can rate his specific dietary advice to our times. So what I would like to do now is to read his very beautiful and striking piece of advice about how important it is to feed ourselves and exercise ourselves properly. He says, if a person cared for himself the way he cares for his horse, he would avoid many serious illnesses. I'm speaking to a Sultan who has lots of horses. You won't find anyone who gives his horse too much fodder. He measures out only as much as the horse can tolerate. But he himself eats to excess. You know, crushing Rambom is talking to the Sultan. He makes sure his animal gets proper exercise to keep it healthy. But when it comes to himself, he neglects exercise, even though this is a fundamental principle in health maintenance and the prevention of most illnesses. If I may supplement that with a quote from Hilchos chapter 4, after he's spoken a little about what to eat and what to drink. He tells us here that even if a person eats the healthiest food and he maintains a strictly healthy diet, if he does not exercise himself, then he is destined for a life of pain and illness. That was a fundamental principle of Rambam, which is expressed very clearly in Mishnah Torah, Hilchos chapter 4. He also gives us an invaluable piece of advice which flies right in the face of our drugstores today and our over-the-counter prescriptions for everything from mild headaches to flatulence to every other kind of thing. He says, even with the utmost care and caution, it is impossible to avoid constant minor fluctuations in our physical functioning. What an insight that is. He tells us you have to be aware that you're always going to be going up and down. Sometimes the stools become a little soft, sometimes a little dry. One day a person may find a change in his digestion or feel a mild headache or a slight pain in some other part of his body and so on. Do not be in a hurry to take medications for these kinds of minor problems. Nature will take care of them without any need for medicines. Follow your normal health regime. He means your normal healthy health regime. If you try to treat these minor ailments, either you will do the wrong thing and cause harm, or if you do the right thing, while you may succeed in restoring the normal balance, you've also taught your body to become lazy, and it will no longer function properly without outside assistance. Hear what Rambam has to say about the doctor. He says, if the patient can be treated through diet alone, he should not be treated with medicines. If it is impossible to control the illness without medications, the first choice should be medicines that are nourishing and food that have medicinal